Hello. So Restream is still screwed up. So we have Scott here, and Old Balls is what I'm calling myself today because I've been so christened by a bunch of wonderful Christians, like the nicest Christian community you ever want to see. And they have christened me Old Balls. Are you still with me, Scott? Oh, no. No, you're muted.
Yeah, I was muted. Hey, when you look at your avatar, do you see a trumpet player with a beard?
Yeah. Okay, do you see the trumpet player? What?
I see the trumpet player on you, but the folks on the stream have no idea what I'm talking about.
Right.
Folks watching, but yeah, you might want to change that.
Yeah. So what should I change it to? Do I have a picture of Old Balls?
I don't know what your picture library is made up of.
Well, and that's not one of the things that it's made up of.
Well, I'd say that's good.
Okay, we got Swifter. Sup, guys? Do you know what stream it was when you looked at the transcript? Let's see. Hang on a second.
Scriptone database and looked at the expression pattern for DDX1L2.
Oh, shit. Oh, man. How long ago was that?
I have no idea. I don't remember that.
That was a while ago. It was probably like a cell stream or something like that. Shit. What stream it was when we looked at? Okay, where I got that information from NCBI, but then I went and annotated it. And I don't know. Looked at the transcriptome database.
Hey, why don't you just go ahead and bite the bullet and turn your camera on so there'll be something on the screen.
Oh, God, I don't know what I look like today. I'm not sure. Let's see if I can figure it out. What do I look like? Oh, my God. Oh, my God.
Let me see what happens if I turn. Well, you'll just get. Let's see if I can get this sticker off. I covered my camera thingy with a sticker.
Yeah.
Oh, you went and hit again. Never mind. If you're not gonna do it, I'm not gonna do it.
I'm doing it. it. Okay. Are you doing it?
I will once I get this. Apparently, when I was being paranoid and not wanting some hacker to turn this camera on, I used a very much more adhesive sticker to cover it than I usually use.
Okay, next time
you feeling of I'm paranoid. I don't
want to mute yourself, Scott. Mute yourself. God damn.
Because I'm scratching. Okay.
Oh my God, you are scratching. Okay. Anyway, let's see. What do you? Okay, Swifter. What do you want to know about DDX11L2? I know a bit about it, but I could have you on, talk to you about it, and show you some of the stuff if you need to know. DDX11L2 is, there we go. Scott's on. Now we can see you, actually, Scott. Hey, nice picture. Now you went away. Anyway, what do you want to know about DDX11L2? I love that one. That's my favorite pseudogene, and it is a pseudogene because it only has the tail end of a DDX11 gene, and it has the tail end that misses about 7 motifs in the protein. So if it has a function, it's going to be way different than a regular DDX11. Anyway, so we're here looking at morality and stinkiness. And let's see if I got it here. YouTube. Yep, there we go. So where'd you go on me, Scott? You still working on your camera?
Kind of.
Okay.
I couldn't find the right hat. Okay.
You got the right hat now?
Yeah, my hair was all messy. I went outside and walked among the livestock and got them some water and stuff like that. So.
Okay, this is a 5-minute clip from Robert Sapolsky. He's a neuroscientist, and he wrote a book. Oh my God, called Behave. I think. What was the name?
Behave. Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty wonderful book. In fact, I'll probably be listening to it tomorrow morning while I'm driving. And he was on Big Thing. He was and he had this. Anyway, this is a little clip. Is moral disgust just bad evolution? And he's talking. He talks about a few things that are very interesting in this. So we want to give this a listen. Now, I went on JimBob's channel, I don't know, a week ago or something like that, or not the last appearance, but the one before that. And I said that morality is based on the sense of smell, that it's tied up in the sense of smell. It very much is.
You kind of hear that whenever there's talk of neurology or neuroscience and morality.
Yeah. But I think basic morality is tied up in behavior. And it's behavior that has something called valence, which means it's positive or negative. You either go toward something that you prefer or away from something that you prefer. And man, this drives Christians crazy when you say morality is preference, because they come up with this stupid thing where they say, "Oh, well, then if you prefer to murder people, it's okay." And no, that's not what we're saying when we say morality is based on preference.
Yeah, there's a real, and of course, anybody might tend to do this when they're thinking about morality, between the individual. There's an interplay between the individual and the society. And this is a society through basically negotiation via the application of force and reason and culture that that determines the moral landscape. And it's kind of a negotiation, via power and values and behavior. And all that's to say is you can't think in terms of morality, of individual morality, before you think in terms of societal conditioning and morality.
Yep. So we got the organism, and then we have its environment, and its environment can be a society. So sometimes the environment is other animals, of your type.
Right.
And you have a whole bunch of body biology. So body biology, that's part of your morality biology, basically. And these things impinge on you, and they work together. And what you're saying is that there's this interaction between them that ends up being what morality is. But then
I kind of think about it in terms of vectors. When you do vector algebra or vector math.
Well, I drew vectors. I drew vectors. I have arrows pointing somewhere.
Okay, well that's cool. But there's a way to determine what the final, and I don't know what the physics term is, but the direction and force that the a set of clashing vectors will take.
Oh yeah.
And that's kind of what's happening. Just as an analogy, you have all sorts of groups of people with differing values and differing solutions for obtaining those things that you value, and who should and shouldn't engage in whatever activity. And somehow in the mix, you get a direction. Now what happens is that it kind of breaks down, and you might have little groups of people who secretly go off and do what the general society says is immoral, but to that clan or that tribe or that clique or that cult of people, what they're doing is moral. But so it's not a perfect blending of values and behaviors to obtain those values, but that's kind of what's happening. And it's like chemical processes where you have, solids fall out of what would otherwise be a liquid because of certain conditioning, or maybe you've saturated it too much. Just once again, as an analogy, don't take it literally, but complicated things happen when you have populations. But when you're talking about how to behave as a social group, then you get morality,
Right.
and you have to look at that social environment as well as the physical environment before you start talking about individuals and what they do.
That's fucking brilliant. Did you come up with that using vectors for morality?
Yeah, that's kind of how I thought of it. There's all sorts of things like game theory and terror theory. Is there terror theory? And I'm sure that our fine watchers and listeners can name some different types of theory that involve, values, resources, behaviors, and where you come up with certain policies or certain practices, and I think it's all part of that kind of dynamic.
Yeah. So what I've got on the screen here, okay, we got vector 1, desire, and that's kind of short, and vector 2, society, which is huge for us. It's a huge part of our morality. And then you got a resultant vector, right? And I'm not sure if I drew the resultant in the right.
Yeah.
I'd have to think about it, but anyway, yeah. So that's one look at it. Okay, then there's another thing about morality that's very interesting with human beings, is that we can come out here and we can conceptify it. We can have concepts. We can have language about it. And we can language. Okay. And we can also describe it. We can write it down. So what they did in the Bible and a bunch of other books is they basically took these ideas, basically morality, the concepts of morality that we figured out, that we really didn't understand what the fuck we were talking about, but we had this feeling of what's right and what's wrong, right?
Right.
So I feel it's wrong to murder people, and I feel it's wrong to steal, that you steal from me.
And one reason why you're going to feel that way is because, let's think of the bumpers that a pinball will hit up against. You have a group or a society that you grow up with before you're able to have rational thoughts that kind of push against you when you engage in some behavior, involving, hey, I want that, I want to do this, and a bigger life form, a bigger member of your family or your greater community sees that and goes, no, don't do that. You can't do that. I do it all the time with my grandkids because they want to beat the crap out of each other or scratch eyeballs out because somebody has their Pikachu toy or whatever.
Yeah.
And the kind of instruction I give them, you can't really call it rational. I'm not going to sit out there and do a syllogism about it, but you're just going to teach them, don't do that. You don't do that. Don't do that. No. And they see the reaction on your face and they know, boy, they're serious. And, they may commit those, what we would consider assault and battery hundreds of times before they get in their head, I shouldn't do that to other people.
Yeah. But
that's how it takes place. It takes place on a rational level long before you start thinking, now, what happens if I hurt this person? Will there be consequences? And who would want me to do that? And who wouldn't want me to do that? And
right.
You don't even think God doesn't want you to, unless you're brainwashing your children about God, which is people's prerogative.
But the interesting thing is, if you took your grandsons and put them on an island and left, let them grow up by themselves, they would beat the shit out of each other once in a while, or one of them would try to kill the other one. And but at some point, they would develop their own little society between the two of them, and
Yeah.
that's based on these bodily concepts, right?
Or
Well, for one thing, let me finish.
okay.
When you beat the hell out of somebody, you feel adrenalized, and you're also a little bit afraid, and you have a negative valence involved in violence, right? Violence always has a negative valence. Like you will do violence on a piece of food, but if the food bites back and starts scratching you and stuff, it's not going to be as good. Oh my God, Scott, what are you doing?
I'm sorry. I'm trying to adjust my screen because it's a. I don't want to talk about the hardware here, but yeah,
Okay.
sorry. I will quit trying to adjust my hardware
Although
while
you
you're
can
talking.
just mute before you do it. But
I should,
anyway,
yeah.
so there's this whole thing about interacting with another being is a lot more complex than just, oh, I want to beat you up and I'm just going to beat you up, and it's not going to have any consequences for me, right?
Right.
There are consequences built into violence already, and that's what you'll see in a pack of raccoons. One of them will go over and just tear into another one, and but they don't really tear into each other. It's really interesting. They don't do a lot of damage. They might take a swipe at them, or make a mock bite or whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't see any blood out there ever, and they could do blood. So why is that? Why would a band of raccoons do this mock violence, and they wouldn't actually go into full violence and actually kill the other raccoon? Because they certainly could, right?
Well, I think that back in the eons past, or maybe millennia past, there were raccoons that would bloody the crap out of each other, but they would die because blood
They
loss
didn't
is,
survive.
is critical. And the ones that were left, there just happened to be enough of them that weren't so aggressive and weren't so, at least in dealing with their own species, would back off. And those were the ones that were left. And so, once again, you have evolutionary inputs in there. The ones that could get along in their social setting did not die because they did not kill each other.
Yeah, there's also a cost to violence, and a cost to
Right.
violence is going to give it a negative valence at the same time. So anyway, the biology is real complex, but it's also really simple. And where it becomes not simple is when humans do this, right? When we come up with concepts and we start arguing about it. Oh, philosophers, they have this theory of violence and that theory of violence. Well, I kind of say fuck all that. Let's go back to the roots and look at, you got a little worm, right? And he's crawling around. He wants something, and he moves toward it. And if he doesn't want something, he moves the other way. And so it goes back to some very, very reducible roots that we can think about. But now, moving forward to where human beings are, we're certainly not worms. We are mammals. And most of what mammals have is this limbic system control of our behavior and our drives. And it's based on dopamine, it's based on oxytocin, it's based on a whole bunch of hormones that sort of. So some of this morality is built in. That's why if you put your grandkids on an island, they would probably end up bonding deeply anyway.
Well, I think if you put a bunch of pairs of grandkids on different islands, where there's two each on each island, some you would have grandkids that don't make it, and others you would have just one left, and then eventually you would have sets of islands where two of them did survive because they based on, I guess, what age when they started, decided they would cooperate.
Yeah, it goes down to natural selection, the way we are. But that's kind of what I'm saying. But then, okay, we have this. Let's take a look at this. Let's give this a listen.
By the way, I don't know, when you said that we're not worms, remember there is a Christian hymn that where the person describes himself as being just a worm. It's called "Alas, and Did My Savior Bleed," back in 1707 by Isaac Watts. So
Really?
Maybe there are some Christians out there who would think, oh, we are but a worm, but that's not really relevant to this conversation.
What the hell is James saying here? Using eons in a sentence? What did I use in a sentence? Mike isn't usually this crazy. I think eons.
I think I used eons in the sentence.
What did I say? I don't know.
Well, I was talking about raccoons and back eons.
Oh,
eon or something. Okay.
Eon to something.
Eon. And now I get it. He's witty. He's a witty writer.
A witty motherfucker. Yeah.
Anyway. Oh, he did a really good live stream today about money. Anybody who wants to hear some good thinking, go to James Apperson's channel and find the latest live stream.
About money?
It was, I don't have the title with me. Maybe James can help me cheat and just type it in the side chat. But about, poverty and things like that, money issues.
Yeah, that would be a good one to watch. Been thinking a lot about that lately, and I think it's behind a lot of our politics. Basically, the haves and the have-nots have gotten pretty crazy since 1980. I think that was kind of Reagan's fault, right?
Well, he did begin a lot of things that have just the consequences thereof we're still feeling. And,
1981, when I had an up-and-coming software company, I met with a businessman, or he was a day trader, because that's what we were into, is trading software. And he told me, he says, there will never be another billionaire ever. And since 1980, we've had like 400 or 500 of them pop up in the world.
Yeah, there's billionaires everywhere doing dumb things.
Man, was he wrong. And I think what he didn't see coming is maybe Ronald Reagan or Reaganomics. I don't know.
Could be.
I was all for that back in the day. So I had my little kids, my little sons, calling Reagan grandpa. Anyway, I don't think he was bad in every way. I think there were some interesting things, and who knows where the economy would have gone had it not been for that. Actually, he had dementia toward the end of his term, and they kept it a secret, which is really interesting. He ended up dying not long after dementia. Anyway, so I wanted to play. This is by Robert Sapolsky. And he was on the Big Thing channel, and this is only about 5 minutes, and I think we should listen to the whole thing. What do you think,
okay.
Scott? Okay,
that's fine. I just where are we going to get copyright stricken?
Well, we want to interrupt a few times in between, so
okay,
we'll do that. Here we go.
Unrecognizable to other species, and that's maybe 50,000 years old, right around the time that our ancestors.
What?
We think metaphorically, we think in parables, we think in ways that are unrecognizable to other species. And that's maybe 50,000 years old, right around the time that our ancestors started doing things like throwing pigment on the walls of a cave. And this pattern of colors stands for an animal, stands for painting, cave painting.
Okay, he's talking about the rudimentary beginnings of concepts, of how we started to develop concepts and language. And now there could have been a genetic change in our population, like in that bottleneck coming out of Africa.
Right.
But the chances are that we were already at a point where we could respond to culture, and we would end up with cultural evolution. And that may have had a lot to do with how we think. And our language basically is something that we've used as an extension to our brains. And we've created more powerful brains by coming up with these linguistic concepts. But anyway, I'm not sure what Sapolsky would say about
paintings. The first sign that this is not a horse, this is a picture of a horse. And that was an incredible leap forward. So we're this symbolic species, and our brain does this unbelievably fancy symbolism. But the interesting thing is, it actually doesn't do it all that well. And it has to do with the fact that 50,000 years is a blink of an eye in evolutionary terms. 50,000 years, you invent all these abstract sort of concepts. You invent the notion of a moral transgression. A baboon could be pissed off at another baboon who's bitten him and chase him as a result, but he doesn't frame it as a moral failure. This moral transgression business is very new. So how's the brain going to do something like that in the eye blink of 50,000 years? And you see all sorts of interesting improvisations. For example, there's this part of the brain called the insular cortex, the insula. Any normal run-of-the-mill mammal bites into a piece of food that's rotten and rancid and toxic. The insular cortex activates, triggers all sorts of reflexes. You gag, you feel nauseous, you spit it out, whatever. Great way to avoid being poisoned by rotten food. Human bites into rotten food, exact same thing. That's what the insular is for. But then you do something different. Now sit down somebody and ask them to describe to you a time they did something totally rotten and skeevy to somebody else, or hear about some horrible moral transgression, and here's this heartless robber baron that's repossessing this elderly woman's kidney dialysis.
Yeah, what a great fucking... I love this example here. Robber baron that's repossessing this elderly woman.
Yeah, you don't come after my kidney dialysis machine. I'll put some buckshot in your ass.
Right. This is great.
Some horrible, morally appalling act, and the insular cortex activates, and you feel disgusted by what that person... Hey, when you get to humans, this part of the brain that detects toxins in your tongue does moral disgust as well. Aha. So that tells you a couple of things. It tells you why you could be so morally appalled by something that you feel nauseated by it. Hearing about that makes me feel sick to my stomach. Having done that leaves a bad taste in my mouth. I just feel I need to wash my hands of having done that out, damn spot. So it tells you something about intermixing the metaphors there. It tells you something about evolution. And
it tells you something about how it is connected to that sense of taste and smell. And that is really interesting because we have so many linguistic constructs. And I don't have any information about how that runs across different languages. But in English, certainly, we have about 50 different ways that we will relate moral, being repelled by somebody's morality to it stinks. It stinks. Literally, it stinks.
Yeah.
JimBob stinks. I mean, when I watch his shows, I get a bad taste in my mouth, and he stinks. And yeah. Anyway, so and I was trying to make that point to them, and they've been going on about it ever since.
It's hard to accept when you have other theological biases that are influencing you.
Yeah, and their theological biases are really interesting. This Orthodox Christianity. Well, you say
they, remember.
I know
sure everybody in his audience is not an Eastern Orthodox.
Yeah, but it's interesting how there is, and that isn't the essence of Eastern Orthodox Christianity. What JimBob is doing, he's taken and put an evangelical creationist spin on it, right? He's done this. He's Americanized it and turned it into this evangelical hate haven, and it's really interesting. And I'm very interested in seeing how many of these Orthodox Christians exist in the U.S. that are also right-wing, anti-Veers and Trump supporters. I'm afraid to say that V word because YouTube keeps taking my videos down. If you just say the word. Anyway, so this, when you think about it, there is a lot of evidence that our reaction to morality is very much based in our sense of smell and our sense of taste, and that the same parts of the brain are involved and they drive us. And he's going to elaborate a little bit on why that's a problem, why that can be a problem.
We came up with this moral transgression disgust. We didn't invent a new part of the brain. In some ways, hey, insular cortex, that does disgusting food. Moral disgust, I don't know, that vaguely sounds sort of like that. Hey, somebody give me some duct tape. I'm going to strap moral disgust onto gustatory disgust. The insular cortex does that now. What's most interesting thing about that, though, is at the end of the day, if this neuron in your insular cortex activates because this food is fetid and disgusting, and activates because you're hearing about an act that was morally reprehensible, if it can't tell the difference, we have trouble telling the difference between visceral disgust and moral disgust. And thus you see things like we mistake things that are viscerally very, very strange with being viscerally wrong. Ooh, they eat different stuff than us. They dress in different ways. They pray differently. That's not just different. That's wrong, wrong, wrong. We mistake feeling disgusted by something as being a good litmus test for deciding what's right and wrong. And what we know is somebody's disgusting, this is simply wrong, is somebody else's perfectly normal, loving lifestyle. And it's tempting if your stomach is in a total uproar, if it makes you puke, you must rebuke. We mistake the strength of those visceral responses for abstract moral judgments. So it's a very interesting intertwining. The part of the brain that tells you something about if this is hot or cold plays a role in judging. Does somebody have a warm or cold personality?
So that's really interesting where he took that, right? Like in the beginning, he said, we our brains do this, but we're not very good at it. We're not very good at figuring things out. We have this ability to come up with concepts and language, but it can really fucking backfire. It can really be wrong. And when it comes to moral disgust about different lifestyles that are foreign to us or don't appeal to us for some reason, and that would involve a whole lot of things that are going on in our political system today. And you end up with this really strong emotional repulsion to that idea without going to the point where you analyze what is really going on and you realize that my sense of disgust or taste has been triggered. Some very, very lizard-like part of my brain has been triggered. And I need to fucking rationally consider that and get my mind around it and become acclimated to these different lifestyles and different people and other ways of doing things. Like, and the other thing about human beings is we like on the farm in rural Minnesota, there would be all this talk like, those Bruseniaks, they do this and they do that. And then we'd be like, those Johnsons, the Johnson clan, right? And it would always be clan-based, right? And it would be, and we would have disgust for these other clans of or other families.
Right.
And that was really interesting. And in my early moral upbringing, when I would walk around Mountain Iron, Minnesota, I'd run into a group of people. And the first question they asked me was, who's your father? Which Brusenak are you?
Yeah.
Which sub-clan, right? They wanted to get right down and I called
they want to identify whose folk you were to find out.
And so I suffered
how valuable you were.
I suffered karma from my father, right? What my father's transgressions had reached down and actually been a problem for me. And that's really, really interesting. But anyway, the names of these two chemicals, putrescine and cadaverine. You'll find those in rotting animals.
Mm-hmm.
They actually named the chemicals that, and we could show the molecules if we went to Wikipedia. What do we got? Doorknob head here. Okay. Eastern Orthodox wild, it seems almost like a filter to colored folks that have the slightest sense of how reality actually works. I don't know. I don't think the original idea behind Eastern Orthodox is like that, but what I'm saying is that there's a group in America here that call themselves Eastern Orthodox that are going to get to be as problematic as these fucking Baptists, I don't know. Anyway. Okay, listen to the rest of this. So
If you were sitting in a hard chair versus a soft, cushy one, you were more likely to judge somebody as having a hard, inflexible personality. Whoa, the symbolic, metaphorical stuff is so cool and so human and fancy, but we have trouble telling the difference. Somebody else's pain can feel just as painful as your pain because it's the same part of the brain that's processing both.
Yeah, what is it they say about, like, if you're going to court and you appear before the judge just before lunch, you can expect a harsher sentence.
Yeah.
Because that's just the way judges work.
They've tested this over and over, and it's really interesting. If they put people in an uncomfortable place, they're more judgy, and and so what the message here is: use your fucking brain a little more carefully. I don't know, because it is our brain that's doing it to us, but our brain isn't as thinky and rational as we would like to believe. We're driven by our biology, number one. And that's why addicts use drugs and alcohol, because they're driven by their biology more powerfully than they're driven by this rational part of our brain. And I guess what we're trying to do is we're trying to think things through a little more. Now that we know a lot about what we are as organisms and how we work, we, for the first time in history, have the opportunity to use science. Oh my God, we lost Scott. We have the opportunity to use science to become better people and to become a better organism, I guess is what I'm saying. Anyway, so I've lost Scott. That's a problem. He's back. He back. No, he has no video feed. He's trying to be back. What else we got going on here? Monday vibes. You back, Scott? Oh, you're not back yet. Let me see here.
How could you argue autonomous reason over and over? Laugh tracks. I see coward running away. Running away from what? You want to jump on and entertain us? Let's go. You're smart enough to listen. Yeah, no, come on. That's a cop-out. I just predicted. Listen, put the link in. Jump me the left.
Well, I kind of want to learn something. So tell me about. So I had this discussion with JimBob right there at 1:16:24. I'll put the link to this particular video in my description. I'm not going to put the title. Let's see. What the hell? Get that done. But I went in and asked him questions about this orthodoxy that he talks about, because I become very curious about it. And I think the idea is that the Thomas Aquinas branch of Christianity is based more on rationality. They will try to reason their way to figuring out what God is, as near as I understand. And the orthodoxy is based more on this idea of a spiritual connection to God, where they are not God, but they try to become as like God as they can. That's their goal in life. And I was trying to point out to JimBob that sounds a little more like biology and Buddhism to me than the other method, of being strictly in your brain. And it was I've got a transcript to the discussion and I can take a look at it. But it's I'm going to throw the link out and see if anybody wants to come in and talk about this stuff. Hang on a second. Because there are some really interesting things, I think, in all of this. Let's see. Oh, I'm hoping that works. I'm hoping the link works. Anyway. But now, what I've read about the Eastern Orthodox Christianity is it seems a little more spiritually connected, and that is connected to this feeling of spirituality that we are all capable of. And so it connects you a little more to your biology then it should connect you to these concepts, right? But of course, when it comes over, when it ends up over here in the West, we tend to fuck that all up, and we'll tend to write descriptions and concepts, and we go off, and what these idiots on his channel are doing is, or him, him and his idiot friends that are Eastern Orthodox, is they're actually going against the Eastern Orthodox idea by rationalizing some of these features of their religion. And when they rationalize that, they're moving more toward the regular Christianity, the Thomas Aquinas version of it, which I think makes sense. But let me go. Oh no, we need another comment in here. Filler comment. We need a filler comment because YouTube puts a fucking heart in the way. So you can't get at that little menu anymore until you say something. So anyway, let's see. Where were we talking about apples? Let me see if I can find apples. Alt F, apple. There was another point I wanted to make, and that was at about 142. Oh my God, was I in there that long? 142? I guess and this was not a bad discussion with him. I actually got him to settle down a little bit, and he actually answered some of my questions instead of being just an ass, Okay. It's sort of like Wittgenstein's language games, right? There's a rabbit kind of thing that we come to know by experience, by being exposed to a lot of rabbits in the same manner. Is that too loud, guys? Is that a lot louder than we are? Let me know in chat. ChatGPT is exposed to the web, right? That's how we do it. But, from my mind to your mind, we couldn't say, oh, there's a representation in your mind, and it looks like the neurons in my mind. That isn't how it works.
So let me just take a...
So, okay, JimBob was, I don't know what he said in the beginning, but he was talking about, he has a physical representation in his mind, and I have one in mine. And one would think that we have these representations of what's going on in the world outside of us. And I'm trying to tell him that, no, that's not how it works. I'm an anti-representationalist. We don't have a clear representation of a rabbit in our minds. What we do is when we think about rabbits, we fire a lot of neurons back into our visual system according to some pattern that sort of puts up a little bit of an image so we can kind of see a rabbit in our minds. And it's interesting that people that are very, very artistic have developed that ability to feed backwards into the visual system, and they can imagine a visual image more identically, and they can actually draw it out, and create it. Where me, I have a very, very, you would call it adumbrated, an adumbration of, or a cartoon of the image, because I'm not very good at visually projecting back into my mind. But that's kind of what we're doing when we think of the Apple word. And we always do it in real time, in the present. So there's no representation in the brain per se. There is a neural net that has been trained up, just like ChatGPT, to when we see a rabbit or when somebody says the word rabbit, we have all these interconnections in this neural net that allows us to have this concept of a rabbit. But now if I looked at the neurons in my mind and mapped them onto the neurons in your mind, they wouldn't be anything alike at all, because your neurons wire up stochastically. And there's no way that we could take a scan of one person's brain, somehow superimpose it on another person's brain, fire the same areas of neurons, and end up with the same concept. Because everybody's going to have a different way that neural net became trained up, that sort of thing. So anyway, and
just a quick example. When I say the word apple, right, I'm using physicality, right? Like let's say we're standing next to each other and not on the computer, because it complicates things, this medium. Let's say we're standing next to each other and I utter the word apple. Now, The sound apple comes out of my mouth and perturbates air, and then that perturbation of air hits your eardrum, and then
Right.
your brain faculty interprets the vibrations and the frequency of hitting your drum, and it goes through your evaluation system, and then you can discern in this language, he said apple, and apple means this thing out there in the world, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What I'm saying is the word itself, the air coming out of my mouth, is never identical to the concept apple. So in your view, could you tell me mechanically what's happening under a physicalist view that I'm able to send air, perturbation of air through sound to your eardrum, and we can both be thinking about the same thing? Can you tell me what's physically happening under a physicalist view in that example?
Okay. So to use a simpler example, if I say Loki, natural yums, my cat immediately jumps up and he runs up on his natural yum table, and he waits for me to give him natural yums, right? And I tell him, Loki, they're yummy and they're natural. And the other two cats come running in and they want some too, right? So basically, we have both been exposed to these words in a different manner, right? But now I have exposed them to the. He's rejecting it. He's shaking his head and just absolutely rejecting that. But that example is really interesting because I'm guessing unless he is a cat person, he doesn't know what natural yums mean, but my cats do. So are my cats smarter than he is? Well, I think they are, but because they have been trained up on this sound pattern to fire up, to fire up something that means or has some sort of intentionality or aboutness that they understand that they're going to get natural yums when I say it, which is interesting. And of course, he rejects that. He doesn't want to understand how physicalists actually think about the use of that word and associated it with natural yums.
Okay, hold on. Let me
you
stop
and I
there.
did the same thing with apples.
Hold on. It's not the same thing because
why not?
Here's why. Because a cat doesn't know what natural means.
Right. Okay. So that's where he went with it. Like, of course, they don't know what natural means and they don't know what yum means, but they do know what natural yum means. And his problem is that he thinks, every human, like his mistake is that he thinks that when we learn language, that we always rationally put it together. And that's not how we learn language. We learn language just like ChatGPT learns the interweb. And this is very, very interesting. It leads to some interesting ideas. We think we're so special.
The cat knows the sound. No,
the cat doesn't know each individual word.
But he knows what natural yums are. The cat is responding to stimuli that he associates with the food. Okay, that's it.
And so are we. What the fuck does he think we're responding to? I mean, we're responding to stimuli when we hear the words. And it just ends up firing off the set of neurons in our brain that are in that artificial network, but it's not artificial. It's a biological network, learns the same way as any other artificial network learns. And we know this, okay? We know how this works. And it fires off this whole set of interconnections. And it's really kind of cool when you think about it.
You could have said, no, you could have said yappa yappa poopacock, right?
Yeah.
And the cat would still respond the same way. It has nothing to do with the natural, what the item is. However, you and I, if you said natural yum yums, right, and we saw your cat jump on the table, you and I would both know what natural yum yums are. Maybe there's a store that sells them. Maybe we both know the commercial. We're referencing something else that the cat's not doing categorical distinctions of.
Yeah, cats don't watch TV and they don't know our language. And I've never seen my cats use the internet or their phones. I bought them phones, but they never use them. So I don't know.
Of universals and concepts. They're responding to stimuli that's irrelevant to the sound, actually. The sound is just paired with the action, and they go, oh, this means I'm eating. That's all. I asked you that's why I asked you in my example to respond to, not the cat's example. In our example, I said the word apple. And can you tell me, under your physicalist, naturalistic view, what's actually happening such that when I say the word apple and it perturbates air and hits your eardrum, that you and I are both thinking the same thing and understanding what that means?
Okay, we both had exposure to real apples in the world, right?
Okay.
And this is the other point I wanted to make, that I think is pretty important. And so, some of the ideas I have about the brain and how the brain works, that we got two human beings sitting here, and one of them's a little dumber than the other, a lot dumber. JimBob's a lot dumber, and we have an apple. I don't know, I should have made that. Yeah, it's a pretty horseshit apple. Not very good at this stuff. And we utter the word between us, apple, and we hear the sound, and it fires off a whole set of neurons in JimBob, which is very, very different than the set of neurons in me, except that they would be in some of the same brain areas. If we did a brain scan, his Broca and Wernicke's areas would light up, and so would mine. But the exact neurons that represent that word, that have been trained to understand that word, would be very, very different. The individual neurons would be different. The individual network would be different. Just like when you train a neural network up, basically, and you've got all these connections, every time you train it, you're going to end up with different weights on the inside. So it's the same thing, as we are very much like the AIs that we are creating right now. And so, but the thing I was trying to explain to him, and what he doesn't understand, is that we each have a long history of interacting with the environment, right? From the time we went down to being single-celled animals. We were all single-cell animals at one time, called zygotes, which are fertilized cells. We basically had these little experiences in a very different spot with that apple. So because apple is something that humans share in the environment, okay, the environment is what creates this thought of an apple. And then, of course, we interact again with the sounds to associate these things. And we have a network that allows me to say apple, and JimBob feels like he knows what I mean because he has the same experience. And it's interesting, but he doesn't know exactly what I mean. I may be thinking about green apples. I may have grown up with a family that bought nothing but green apples, and he bought red apples. And so we have a slightly different idea, but we always get the feeling that we know enough about what the other person means in order to say, okay, I understand you, that sort of thing. Unfortunately, concepts like physicalism go right over his head. He doesn't quite get it. Sound paired to an action. Let's see, ape-shaped carbon. I wish I had a partner in here, because I'm no good alone, guys. I suck when I'm by myself. A sound paired to an action sounds like language to me if the processing of the sound is different between species. Even if the process is, yeah, right. And my cats are reacting in this very same way. And when I say natural yum, they don't have to understand what natural means and what yum means. They don't have to have seen commercials. Their timeline is going to be very different, these cats, than our timeline, right? They've been exposed to the words, and they've been exposed to the stimuli at the same time. And they ended up with two sets of neurons colliding and coalescing enough to understand what natural yum is. But I thought what was interesting is that I don't think JimBob ever heard of natural yums, and my cats understand it, and he doesn't. So who's better? Who's smarter? And I taught my cats, I think, about 20 words, and I know that they know these words because they do exactly what you would expect them to do if they understand these words. Like go, well, the phrases, go outside. Are you hungry? just a couple of, it's really interesting. They always behave very much like they're communicating with me. Doggy knows words. It's weird. They can pick up what they don't have is the grammar and the syntax and the further conceptualization, right? That sort of thing. Yeah, I should have drawn. Well, I could have drawn pictures for him because actually, when I go on StreamYard, I have access to the same drawing pad. But he'd never put up with that. He'd never actually look and try to understand what you're saying because he just wants to run on and perform his little show. Verbal and nonverbal animals, including people, vary in their ability. Yeah, and a lot of what we do with each other when we communicate is nonverbal. When we communicate in person, but then, we have all been trained now on the web. And like, you don't see me right now. So you're not getting any of the body language. And I wonder what that's doing to us internally, whether or not that's changing us. I don't know. Not entirely sure. So nobody wants to come in and talk to me. It's horrible. Oh, there's somebody. No, that's Scott. No, that's somebody. It's somebody else. That's Simos. Is it Simos?
Yeah. Hello.
Hey. Yeah. So what do you think of all this? I don't know.
Well, difficult to say right now. I think, in short, I don't know about this specific example. You'd have to play me a bit and explain it to me.
You haven't been listening.
Not overly, no. I've got a new headset, and I thought I'd come in and test it.
Okay.
See how my microphone is and stuff.
So me and JimBob. So JimBob's trying to figure out what an apple is, and he's trying to figure out how language works under physicalism.
Oh, okay.
And I think a third grader could understand this stuff. Oh no, it's Mr. Anderson. Hey, there you are.
I see.
Hey, how's it going?
There we go.
Yeah, you got to turn your camera on, otherwise, for some reason, Restream doesn't show you until you show the camera. So how you doing? So, have you been following my little example here and the discussion?
You know what? I just saw you were streaming, and I jumped on, and I saw somebody, and I heard you say, "Oh, nobody's jumping on my." Nobody wants to talk to me. And I said, I've been meaning to talk to that guy. So I figured I'd just hit the StreamYard link or whatever it is and say hi. I don't have a bunch of time, but, figured,
Okay.
you and I could have a quick chat if you wanted.
Yeah. I was talking trying to explain physicalism to somebody who really doesn't want to listen at all. And JimBob and we were talking about Apple. And and he wanted to know under the physicalist paradigm, how does language work and how does sound work and how do brains work and all that stuff. And I was trying to explain it to him. And, so anyway, I was trying to explain it to the group that the really interesting thing about our brains, they're very much like artificial neural networks, right? In sections of the brain, and not so much in how they're structured overall. But we do have these little sections of our brain that basically are trained like neural nets. And the important thing about Apple is that throughout time, like we each come from a zygote, we start learning, and through that time, we're going to have an interaction with our environment, particularly specifically with an apple. And that interaction is going to start to train us up, and we're going to train to understand the language apple, and we're going to be trained to have like a visualization of an apple, and we're going to be trained with a whole lot of other things like the taste of an apple, grandma's apple pie that we loved, all sorts of things, and we're all going to be individual, but there's going to be something homologous about apple in the environment, and that allows us to communicate as human beings. And it's really that simple overall, even though, neuroscience is pretty dense, but that's kind of how it works. That's what I was talking about, but we can move on and talk about other things.
Well, I think that actually is very relevant to somebody like JimBob, because you say we have these experiences, etc., that lead to Apple and understanding what an apple is. But to my ears, right, and as a physicalist myself or a naturalist, whichever you prefer, I think we learn through induction. We don't learn new things through deduction.
I'm sorry,
And
guys. Hang on.
I'll just pontificate while you take your phone call, just to keep it no dead air. Mr. Anderson, do you understand what I'm saying? That we learn through induction, not deduction. No? Okay.
I'm back. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm back.
So, like I'm saying, we learn through induction, right? As children, first of all, as child, mummy shows what to do.
I mean, typically, I think that's true. Like, so let's just sort of, for everybody else's sake, like, so induction, guys, is when you're creating kind of general rules, right? So let's say, for example, that you were, okay, you do it.
What?
Say again?
Yeah, I think you blanked out for some reason.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, basically, it's the relevance it has to physicalism is that we learn through the process of induction through our senses.
Yeah, okay.
We learn apples.
We have just for anybody who doesn't know this already, or needs a reminder. So, like, induction is when you are taking some number of specific observations, and then you are creating a general rule. So,
yeah. Yep.
Okay. How about now? Better?
Yeah. You kind of went out for a little while there, and it was.
Can I be heard? Okay, or not?
Yeah, you're fine, Simus.
Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
Go ahead, Mr. Anderson.
So let me give you an example then. So, okay.
You cut out again. Oh my God.
I must be breaking out. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
So what I was going to say is let's give concrete examples of induction and deduction so we can kind of see what you mean, and then I think what you're saying will make a little bit more sense. So let's take a silly example, right?
Oh, and you cut out again. Damn it.
I can hear you now. Yeah.
Okay, you're back.
I can hear you. So to take a silly example, then that's okay. So to take a silly example, then let's say we were to say, we have a bunch of specific examples that. Am I cutting out?
Yeah, a little bit. Once in a while. Now you're back.
Am I cutting out, or is Simon cutting out?
Simos isn't talking.
No,
I'm cutting out.
I'm not talking. Yeah, I'm not. Yeah, I'm trying to let you get through what you're saying.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't know what's happening. Can you hear me now?
We can. I'll try to raise my hand.
How about now?
If I can't hear you, we can.
How do I keep talking? Okay. Well, you tell me when I cut back in and how much you missed. So, let's take a silly example then. So let's say, for example, that there is we have a whole bunch of specific observations of there's a turd. That's too bad.
You cut out right there. Now you're back.
I don't know what's happening.
You only cut out for like a few seconds. So
let's say that we find a turd in the sink, right?
No.
And we find out that Bob did it, right? Yeah. And then and then the next day we find another one, and again that Bob did it, and another one, and we have, say, 10 examples of people pooping in the sink, right. and every time it was Bob. And so induction would be if we said, okay, you know what? Generally speaking, when we find a poop in the sink, probably it's Bob that did it.
Right.
Right. And that would be inductive reasoning.
Oh, what a great example. I'm horrified. Go ahead. Okay. So deduction. Oh, no, you cut out totally.
Okay. So I think we should go to the traditional one, which is you're in the street. Okay. And there's you as you walk down the street, you notice all the doors are blue. And this happens for 1,000 doors in a row.
Right. Yeah.
And so what's on the 1,001st time? What do you think it's going to be? It's most likely to be blue because the previous 1,000 doors have all been blue.
Yep.
So we make that prediction. In fact, It's a little stronger than that, because what we say is all observed A's are B, all doors are blue. Therefore, all observed A's are B, so all observed doors are blue, and therefore all A's are B, which is all doors are blue. So that's the form of the argument. All A's observed A's are B, therefore all A's are B.
Yeah.
Okay. And deduction, obviously there's different forms of it, but deduction is a type of a syllogism. So the famous one is Socrates is a man.
Okay.
All men are mortal, therefore Socrates is mortal.
Or there are like thousands of empty cans of blue paint with blue paint still in them, and we know that our nation only has blue paint, so we can deduce that all doors will be blue.
Oh, lovely. There you go.
Yeah.
Yes.
To tie it.
But anyway,
example.
The point about it is, and why I'm trying to tie it into physicalism, is because this is how babies learn, right? They get shown things, and basically when things come through our senses, which is the part of physicalism, right? The primacy of the senses, then we can use induction very successfully to navigate our way around the world.
Yeah.
Because we're literally looking for patterns all the time, and pattern seeking is what us apes do best, really.
Yeah, it's how we survive. This basically finding these apple-shaped patterns in the world.
Okay, but that's not to say that there isn't something more sophisticated than that.
Right.
And this is where JimBob falls down, really. I'm sure he understands basic induction, but where he falls down is not realizing, of course, that in a more nuanced naturalism, it's not just our senses that we rely on, right? It's what makes sense of the world around us that we rely on.
Yeah.
So our physical equations, etc., our physics, we rely on the empirical data, but we also rely on the equations, right, and the abstract like representations that we make in order to explain the data the best way possible. And that's more a nuanced version of naturalism, which I think that a lot of theists do not want to try and comprehend, right? They would prefer this naive thing of only things that come through the senses. It's only when we see things,
right,
only making observations, right? No, it's not just the observations. The observations are what we're trying to explain, and we use anything we can to explain those observations, and that includes deductive or abstract objects like equations or arguments.
It's a lot deeper than naive empiricism. There's this whole history that we have of fitting the environment, basically, and fitting certain patterns. And there are patterns within patterns within patterns. I mean, that's all we know about different fruits, apples and pears and strawberries and whatever. I don't know if strawberries are fruit or a vegetable, but anyway, there's a lot more to it than just this naive empiricism. And I think that's often missed in a lot of philosophical discussions. And they talk about sense data. Sense data is the worst damn combination of words that I've ever encountered. It gives you the idea that we're like this solid interface, and there's data coming in or stimulus coming in, and that's all that's happening. And that isn't the way organisms work. So
right, I mean that's very much related to Bertrand Russell, and his ideas of sense data, which I'm a proponent of. I would agree with it because it explains that the a priori knowledge is what could I say, circular at best, foundational maybe you might say, and in fact it's the justification of a posteriori knowledge, which again tends to be inductive reasoning. That justifies.
I think you're going to have to tell us what Bertrand Russell said, because I don't know. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Okay.
Oh, really? Okay. I'm not sure. I can go through it all, but essentially, when he talks about sense data, he's talking about information coming in through the senses to your brain, and then you reason within your brain. And
Yeah.
the difference here is that if you take the sense data and then reason, you're reasoning after the fact, right? But if you reason first and then try and apply that to the data, you're reasoning before the fact. One's called
By
a
definition.
priori. Yeah,
By
one's called a
definition, you are
priori.
reasoning before the fact because you don't have the facts yet.
Exactly.
Okay,
And
sure.
and that type of reasoning,
I think many people can argue with that.
yeah. And a lot of people rely on that as to be the mode that they think is the primary way to reason about the world. Right?
Is to reason before you have facts. How would that be the primary way to?
Well, it's called a priori knowledge, and and a presuppositionalist, for instance, will say everything comes from God. I reason that God is. He's gone again.
Oh no, we
God
lost
is
him again.
Anyway, let's.
I hope he can hear us. But the thing about sense data that's kind of missed is there's when you start out here, as I'll make my screen bigger again. In my idea, you start out as a single-celled organism, which is a zygote, right? And then you develop. And what happens is you got two cells next to each other when you first divide, right? And these, maybe I can just draw it here. So you got two cells. Now you have two cells, right? Well, you start communicating between those two cells. And you're also communicating between the motherly environment that you're in, right? And this particular area of the cell will become the ass, and this will become the nose or the head, right?
Yeah.
Because of the communication from the environment. But now you could call that sense data at a very, very rudimentary level. Right. There are chemicals that are getting into membranes in this cell and changing them, right? But then,
I mean, that's not what Russell's talking about. But I understand that it's.
The problem with sense data, and of course, philosophers have pushed back on this for a long time, is that it sort of like reduces it too much. There's sense data, but there's also a whole lot of internal stuff going on in our bodies.
Sure.
Right? And our minds and whatever. And that ends up being a complex of our biology and the environment. And that's why but you can't say it's nature or nurture. It's both. It's very much both. And we kind of develop. Yeah. And the important point that I always want to make is that we develop in this timeline from a single cell, and all of our knowledge basically comes in, but it doesn't just come in from the outside. It comes in from the inside too. So our knowledge is basically based on our biology, on the kind of organism that we are, and what is happening in the environment. And that amounts to how we perceive the world. And it's a little radical, and I haven't heard too many people talk about it that way, but I always like to go back to the single-celled zygote, which we all were.
You're saying that knowledge comes from inside of you?
Both inside of you.
Independent of reason, or are you just saying that knowledge comes from the application of reason?
Yeah, I wouldn't. The things like reason and concepts and all of that are much higher than the biological basis that I'm talking about.
Okay, so what kind of knowledge do you mean then? What's knowledge to you?
Knowledge would be like if you learn how to ride a bike, you have a certain.
So what portion of that knowledge comes from inside of you?
It would be the way your muscles respond to the pedals and the feeling of your muscles and proprioception, and all of that is going on inside of you. So you're learning both from your body, from the kind of organism you are, and from the bike that you're pedaling, right? And from the tree that you run into or the sidewalk that you fall on.
Right. So when you use your muscles, you're saying you're getting sense data from those muscles, and some of the sense data is generated internally because some of the effects are felt only internally, like when your muscles get sore. Is that all you're saying?
The problem with calling it sense data is we think that there's this shell around our brain, and there's like neurons coming into it, and that sense data coming in.
There are neurons going into your brain.
Yeah, there are. But there are neurons leaving your brain too. And And there are also interneurons happening around your spinal cord where some of your reflexes are actually not in your brain. They're outside of your
Sure.
brain. And
Your
it becomes,
consciousness is exclusively in your brain, though.
no, I say consciousness. That's the other thing where I have a very eccentric view. I believe that consciousness is your mind, body, and world. So it's
So you're
brain.
telling me that if I get an injury to some portion of my spinal column, that can affect my consciousness. I could
Uh,
become a different consciousness as a result of that.
in a very, very tiny way. It will affect how your mind works.
I
Like,
mean, look, if I lose a limb, that'll affect how my mind works because it will
yes,
affect, that will affect my ability to move around the world, right? If I
yeah,
lose a leg, I can't walk normally anymore. But I
yeah.
wouldn't say that part of my consciousness is in my leg because it affected my mind when I lost it. Would
Are
you?
you, are you familiar with the cognitive idea of embodied consciousness? Embodied
Clearly,
consciousness.
I am not. Clearly, no.
Okay. Anyway, that's kind of what I've been brought up on, and that there's a few
I'm a
people.
simple man who has simple thoughts.
Okay. Anyway, uh, but it becomes the thing is we have this idea of where our mind is, right? And often, like if you're a child, I think you feel more like your mind is in your chest, just forward. But then we get like most of our senses are in our head, so we start to think it's in our head, right? And then when somebody comes along
Yeah.
and tells you have a brain in your head, and we say, "Oh yeah, it's in the brain," but these are just ideas you have about where your mind is, okay? And what I
Well,
like,
but I mean, when we look at what is most affected when it is injured, in terms of cognition, right? In terms
right?
of the mind, what we would traditionally think of as the mind, like, you know, if I, like Phineas Gage, like was affected, his personality was affected because something affected his brain,
Right.
not his chest, not any other part of him, his brain. That was the thing that had the direct effect, right?
Yeah, because he had a pipe through his brain, through his frontal cortex, and
Yeah.
yeah, that's going to more of what we are is in our brain than would be in our kneecap. But that doesn't mean that part of what we are and what our consciousness is not related to our kneecap, and where our
Well, what is consciousness then? I mean,
consciousness is.
I can't get my head around the idea that that any portion of your consciousness is in your kneecap. I
Uh,
think that I would still be as conscious as I was before if I had my kneecap removed.
Well, you could judge yourself to be as conscious, but if you lose part of your body, like I've lost my sense of smell. I'm 73 years old, and
Sure.
so a great part of my consciousness is no longer there. So I have a
Of your
lesser consciousness because I can no longer smell things, and that comes from my
your
nose.
consciousness, so you're less
That's
conscious.
yeah, that
You're that much closer to an inanimate object. Is that what you're telling me? I
I'm
mean,
pro-
I would say that your humanity is undiminished by your loss of sense of smell. I consider you as much of a person as before.
yeah, you're pretty far away from this discussion actually. Yeah, my humanity will be the same, of course, because a lot of that is rolling around in my head. But it's
Right.
also
I mean, aren't we talking about, when we talk about your consciousness, aren't we talking about your humanity?
well, yeah, but it's also very much qualia, okay, is also very much in my sense of smell and my sense of sight and my proprioception and my body and everything that's happening around me. And so when I walk around in the world, I do not think that my mind is inside of me. I think that my mind is a combination of the world and the organism that I am. So I'm mostly, I'm autonomous, right? And I understand that God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, that I have a certain reach, right? But when I think of where my mind is now, I think of it as being in the world and being around me in my environment as much as it's inside of me. And that's it. And it's really interesting. I've been doing that for about 15 years. And when you start to think differently about where your mind is, you're your humanity will change, and you will change in how you deal with the world, that sort of thing. But that's neither here nor there, I think. But anyway, it's the idea of, they're looking for the neural correlates of consciousness in the brain, and they're never going to find them. We found all the things in the brain at a kind of a gross level that we're ever going to find. We're never going to find that actual, like this thing. Oh, that's where it is, or that mechanism, or it's going to be quantum mechanics, or it's going to be something like David Chalmers would say. That's never going to happen. We're going to have to get used to the idea that we are brain, body, and world, and start to understand ourselves in that sense. But I wasn't prepared to have this discussion with you, Mr. Anderson. Let's talk about Jim.
No, of course. I mean, I'm at your disposal. Whatever you'd like to talk about.
Yeah. So what do you
I'm
think
just asking questions.
What do you think of what is going on in some of these YouTube channels like JimBob's or Standing for Truth, where they have this whole, I mean, they have a lot of viewers. Like JimBob gets 200 to 500 viewers, right? And his chat
Sure.
is going off, and they all have this political, they seem to follow in a political groove. And it's amazing, but the politics, the science, the metaphysics, it all seems to be in the same bag. And I'm just fascinated with it's the 21st century, and we're still putting up with this shit. I mean, we're still not capable of using what we understand about ourselves and our mind to be better people. And we, this, I guess, pushback against science is one of the big things, wouldn't you say?
I mean, one of the things I think that makes combating, presuppositionalism and young Earth creationism and stuff like that more and more important is that increasingly there's a tie between them and Christian nationalism.
Right.
And that's nowhere more clear than on JimBob's channel, where he is, an avowed Christian nationalist.
Yeah.
SFT is a little bit more, a little softer in that regard. But I mean, he is a pretty staunch fundamentalist too. But he's a little bit more palatable, right, than JimBob is. But that's one of the reasons that, like, I feel like Yak is almost like a litmus test for, whether you can truly be inducted into the Christian nationalism, because, like, if they can convince you to accept the idea that the Earth is only 6,000 years old, then that means that you're going to be, you're pretty much primed to accept any crazy thing that they say.
Malleable. Right? You'll be malleable.
Yeah. So you're kind of, it's like a test to see whether or not you can be molded, right?
Yeah.
And if you can accept that, then you are a good target.
Yeah.
Right.
And that's pretty dark. I mean, that's a dark thought. JimBob.
It also kind of isolates people from mainstream science because it's so divorced from it, right? Yeah. And it's like, if you can't even agree on how old the world is, you can't even agree that somebody else is allowed to know anything or have opinions because they're, because they don't have the right worldview, then it inoculates you against any sort of argument with any other group that the Christian nationalist doesn't agree with. Because, of course, you would disagree with me because you are evil and you are ungodly.
Yeah. And what they like to do is get you in a point where they can interrogate you, and their idea is that they're going to make you look ridiculous, so your worldview is going to be contradictory. But
they try. I mean, that doesn't work so well on me because I'm, like, I've tried to get Darth Dawkins to interrogate me on 2 or 3 occasions now, and he runs from me.
Does he? Oh God, I would love to see that conversation.
Well, look,
there's a post on my channel where he mutes me, and then he talks about how his favorite character in any movie is the Cowardly Lion, and I was like, wow, that is surprisingly appropriate. You identify with the Cowardly Lion. It makes a lot of sense.
Okay, so there's a certain amount of willingness to supplicate in order to be part of the group. So it's not quite as dark as you're saying. It's not some overarching tactic, which is, which some sort of higher Mandalorian is beaming down into the rest of the followers, you know, and trying to ensnare people. People are
The willingness to
willingly.
suffocate is I would say darker than any of the other things that we've
It may
said.
be, but it's not quite as malicious in terms of you know, like a deliberate way of doing things. People wish to do this.
Yeah, but a lot of
They have the right to do this. This is their choice,
Well, they have the
right?
right to be wrong. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah,
yeah,
and all we can do is try and, you know, be reasonable with the objections, and rather than
Yeah.
decrying it as some sense of thing. Bearing in mind, when we debate, as far as I'm concerned, the object is not to convince the person you're debating; it's to influence and slide away those that are beginning to follow,
yeah,
and
yeah,
being supplicant, you know, and
Yeah.
saying, look, you can have your own mind, you can think about this yourself, and therefore it's not quite as thing. People like Darth are never going to change. I mean, just look at his journey, right? His
No, of
journey
course
was
not.
one of having a discussion with somebody, not even caring about mute powers, but still being angry, to this one of complete dominance of you will be my supplicant or I'm not going to talk to you.
right.
And he
Mhm.
still gets people to follow him.
And people like JimBob, I've watched JimBob raise about $5,000 in the last few weeks to send him on trips, and it's amazing. They're playing on a certain group of people that have a lot of fear and anger, and they kind of go
Yeah.
together. And these people are primed for a leader to show them the way. And he's over there right now trying to convince them that gravity doesn't work like physicists think it works, and that we didn't really go to the moon. And
Who JimBob is saying that?
JimBob, he's actually a lunar landing denier.
Oh my gosh! Are you kidding me?
And gravity, he talks about gravity all the time, and he's got some cockeyed theory that
They're grifters. They're grifters.
Is it like the Witsit thing where gravity's electric?
He was talking
universe.
about. He mentioned Witsit, and he's.
Yeah, of course.
I think he doesn't agree with him, but he thinks it's something like that. And I think what he thinks is like divine willingness or whatever. I think that's what he thinks it is, like God willing things to be causal. I don't know, but
All right, well, whatever.
I listened for about 10 minutes today, and I'm like, oh, what the fuck is this?
I don't. You know what? I don't pay attention to JimBob anymore. After I found out how much of how much racism, homophobia, and transphobia goes on in that guy's head, I was like, you know what? I'm done with you.
Yeah, that's kind of why I want to keep my eye on him, actually, because he's.
No, you're welcome to. I'm not giving you the gears. I'm just saying he's not my cup of tea.
Yeah, he's
not the kind of guy I want to. I want to interact with.
He typifies a really rotten thing that's happening in this country right now. And it isn't tiny. It isn't tiny. There's a huge pile of these people. And you know, there's gradations. I've got a neighbor who's intelligent and he's a good person, but I think he's going to vote for Trump again. And there's some reason for that. I don't know. I just worry about us. I'm always trying to understand these people. And the nice thing about JimBob is he shows the grandest stupidity of anybody I've encountered in that evangelical field, right? So I get excited about that because it allows you to take their thinking and pick it apart and look at it. And I'm kind of fascinated with all of that. And then it allows me to get some of my ideas down on paper and out in the public. And I guess that's why I do it. I'm primarily interested in molecular biology, neuroscience, and philosophy of mind. So those would be my key interests. So
I see.
Yeah.
Have you talked at all with Shannon Q?
I have tried to talk to Shannon, but I have not. I would love to have a conversation with Shannon.
You should call into the line when she's on.
Yeah, but they want Christians to pick on. They don't want people to have.
They do, but when there aren't any Christians around, then they talk to atheists.
Yeah, I might one time. I don't know. We were gonna go out to Faithless Forum, I think, or something. They were supposed to show up, and then they couldn't show up. And me and Scott were down in Austin at Faithless Forum, and Erica was there, and Atheist Junior, and a whole bunch of other people were there. And
This is an in-person event?
yeah, it was they were going to have it every year, but then the pandemic put a stop to it. I think I went in 2019 or something.
Oh, cool. Good for you.
It was a wonderful, wonderful get together. I mean, a lot of people were there. Uh, I can't pick their names out of my head right now, but yeah, I've been down to, like, I went down to Austin to the atheist community down there for their bat tour or whatever. Their, you know, where they go out and look at the bats. The atheist community of Austin, the ACA, Matt Dillahunty and Arn Ra and all those. I went down
Is
there.
Matt Dillahunty a Texan? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he lives in Texas. Yeah, in Austin.
Oh, cool.
And Arn Ra
Very
lives.
good.
I think Arn Ra lives around Dallas. And
I knew Aaron Ra was a Texan, and I knew AJ was a Texan, and I knew that Grayson was a Texan too.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that Dillahunty was also a Texan.
Yeah, they hang out at something called the ACA, or the Atheist Community of Austin, and they have a little tiny shithole of a house that they've turned into an office, and they have a library in there, and that's where they tape all their shows. So
there you go.
They may have gotten a new dig since
I believe they did. Yeah, I believe they've got.
I don't know. No, they didn't.
I'm gonna have to talk to those guys and see if I can get on the line. That would be a good idea.
I saw a show the other day, and they were still at that same library.
Oh, really?
I recognized the chairs and everything.
Well, maybe that is the new one then. You should have seen how it was before then.
Well, I did. It looked identical. I've got a picture. It was.
They definitely spent some money. I mean, this is before the atheist experience. Before Matt left the atheist experience.
Yeah.
But maybe 2 years before. I started watching that like way back in, I don't know.
Yeah, that's where I cut my
2009 or 2008.
What was how come they cut ties, the atheist experience and him?
Oh, it's a lot of drama. It's all too much. Really.
Yeah, there was a lot of drama over women, and God, yeah, most of the people that I really cared about, like Eric Murphy and his partner, left the atheist community of Austin, either over the trans issue or some other drama that came up. And
not all the atheists were on board with trans stuff.
Like whenever atheists ever been a homogenous community,
they had a kerfuffle.
You know what I mean?
Fair enough.
They had
Ozzy used to say it's like herding cats.
It is, right?
You know?
Yeah. They had something they refer to as the kerfuffle, when they had somebody on that did a video about trans women in sports, and they had him on, and then they didn't apologize for him enough, and it just turned into a shit show, and it just tore the community apart. And then Matt left a few years later, I think over political concerns or something. There was some kind of internal politics and whatever. But yeah, it's a shame when we fight amongst ourselves.
Yeah.
Right?
All right. Well, I should probably get going here. Sorry, I'm not here for a long time, but I was here for a good time, and it was a pleasure to interact with you again.
I'm very interested in your technique, and I watch you very carefully. And I'm really a bad debater. I'm really bad in person. And you are a genius in person. You are.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, I posted something with Dr. Dan yesterday.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Yeah, Dr. Dan is a good friend, and you are a treasure to the community. I'm really glad you're here, and
thank you very much.
Teach us a great deal. So
yeah, well, it's always fun, to share what you know, and it's just a different perspective than I'm not as good on the science as these scientists, obviously, but there's something different about me that I know about that is useful in any. From time to time, right? In certain situations.
Yeah, my neighbor is a lawyer, and him and I have backyard conversations, and he does exactly the same thing in how he breaks things down and argues, for a case. And it really is interesting. I see a lot of him in you.
There you go.
Yeah, very interesting. But I love it. Yeah. Anyway.
Well, it was lovely to spend time with you, and we'll talk later.
Okay. Bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
Yeah. So, Simos, I have to go for a walk. My son wants to walk me. So.
Yep, no problem, dude. Thanks so much.
Yep.
Catch up with you another time then.
Yep, I've done enough damage here for the day. Old Joe, hi. And Scott is trying. Scott was trying to be on, but anyway, Simons, great to have you on.
No worries. I'll catch up with you when I do.
Okay, take care.
Take care. Bye.
Yep, I'm going to get out of here, guys. Goodbye, cruel world.